Okay, hello and welcome back. Delighted to now have the opportunity to bring back Lisa Perkins, who you just heard from, and Professor Richard Templer, who you heard from earlier on, as well as Professor Yet-Ming Chiang, who you also heard from. So we now have got an opportunity to have a roundtable with all three of them and ask them, whatever we want to ask them. I will kick off while we wait for questions from the audience. And really the aim of this roundtable is to talk a little bit more about the role of businesses. There were quite a few questions about that earlier on. The role of businesses in responsible innovation and in how they can affect the green revolution in a post-COVID world. So very much looking towards, what do we need to do now to mobilize following everything that we've heard today. I'd like to start by coming to you, Lisa, first of all. If you can tell us a bit about the role, to your mind, that businesses play in responsible innovation.
Well, I hope that, through my talk, I maybe didn't overtly touch on responsible innovation, but I think the role that we have is kind of, so from a BT perspective, in terms of driving, we recognise that we're kind of a big player, and we have a responsibility to make sure that that ecosystem is as diverse and as open as it can be, in terms of driving for all of the players within that ecosystem to have the opportunity to generate and drive for sustainable growth. So I think we play a role and we have a seat at many tables, from government through to funding bodies, and we are very mindful of that responsibility that we have and the way that we approach our kind of collaboration piece, both across industry and across our ecosystems is with that in mind.
Thanks very much, Lisa. I mean, you mentioned government in there who are key. From where we are now, do businesses take the lead and set better standards? Do we need to wait for government? Do we need to lobby? What do you suggest is the next step?
I think we probably need to do it all as ever. So I think, yes, absolutely. So yes, we need to help the government, actually. So, they've obviously published their R&D roadmap, and I know that I have fabulous people in my team that are working with them to kind of create the right response to help the government make sure that, we drive for the right innovations that are going to be impactful. As I said before, we're very passionate about our purpose and our ability to be able to speak on behalf of our kind of community to make sure that, our innovation community there, in terms of how we bring that to bear. But I think, so there's an element of that, but there's also an element of just kind of creating this groundswell with all of the companies that we work with to just drive in the right direction together. So I think what's really important is that we can unite around, those kind of common goals to kind of, as I say, kind of create that momentum that needs to go forward. So I think it's all angles at the same time.
Brilliant, thank you. And Richard and Yet-Ming, if I can come over to you, thinking about how can businesses measure the benefits. How can they present those? They're not always, the changes that they're making and the impact on the climate. How do businesses need to quantify that? How do they need to communicate that to stakeholders? So I'm happy for either of you to jump in.
Yeah, Ming, would you like to lead?
Perhaps I can start and say something from the perspective of clean tech startups today. I think that the measurable is CO2 mitigation. If you take a fund such as Breakthrough Energy Ventures, they clearly state that what they're interested in are technologies that at scale can mitigate at least 0.5 gigaton of CO2 per year. And I think that brings a great clarity to the problem. And of course, it's not where you start, but it's where you can end up. And I found that to be tremendously useful. And the way that I think that those kinds of funds and the startups that benefit from their support are approaching it is to have that as the metric, and over time, how is our mitigation CO2 ramping up, right? And of course, we're all in a great hurry, but as I'd say, that's one quite simple metric that I think we can all buy into.
So I'm going to poke a few things into the fire. I think that I talked about being in value chains and systemic innovation, and when you say things about how much you're going to mitigate, how much you're going to reduce emissions, it's actually for the full system. It's not just for your little piece of it, because you can do things which are good for you, but actually in toto create more emissions rather than less. And so I'm also going to pick up on some things that Lisa was saying. But before I do that, I think I talked about companies needing to be intelligent and needing to be communities of learning at the moment. I didn't say it quite like that, but that's what I meant. And I would say everybody needs to understand what a life cycle analysis is, to be really direct. And they also need to understand sustainable development goals. And they need to understand that when you mitigate, you've also got to think about the other effects, the other impacts you're having. And so my kind of commentary back a little bit to Lisa, that engagement with the outside world has to be framed against those things. And it means that also all of us need to be aware, if we're banging the drum for a solution of a particular type, rather than banging the drum for the outcome. We are all very good at lobbying for our own stuff. We are less good at lobbying for outcomes that we require. And I think when you start framing that, you can have the right kind of dialogue with government, the right kind of dialogue with the public, and indeed with your value chain.
Brilliant, thank you, Yet-Ming and Richard. I think it's really key here. It's to have multiple conversations, but it's exactly like you said, to think about all the different stages of the lifestyle, not just the immediate problem, not just the solution, but the outcome, but actually all of it. Think about the whole chain, the whole way through. We've got a really interesting question come through about the role of location in this. And, this is something I was thinking about, your, high-tech hubs, are they given the situation with COVID, is this killing high-tech hubs? Is this going to kill innovation? Is this going to have an impact? And the question that's being asked here is, exactly the same. London, MIT, Adastral Park. What about the impact of that location on those? And what are your thoughts? Shall I start with you, Lisa?
Sure, I think I'm probably the obvious person on this. I mean, I think, I am very conscious, as I talk about Adastral Park and wax lyrical about the magic of Adastral Park, that obviously over the last few months, it has been significantly reduced in, numbers of people actually present on site and so on and so forth. We've all seen this, right? I think what it's taught us to do. So I think some of the pluses have been, learning to innovate in new ways and learning to collaborate with people in new ways. And in some senses, it's normalized situations where people have been in different places, with all of us being in a virtual world. In some ways, it's meant that our footprint has widened, outside of the park into this virtual world. So I do think there has been some goodness and there's been some learning. And I think we need to, move forward with that learning into whatever world we find ourselves in the future. But I think what definitely can't seem to be replicated, that is the lifeblood of innovation, is something that we're calling in my team that kind of conversation by happenstance, you know, those serendipitous conversations. I'm sure everybody's nodding. You know, we spend our lives on back-to-back team calls or Zoom calls or what have you. Every single call has got a purpose with a specific audience for a specific goal. And just what can't be replicated is those impromptu, you know, kind of conversations and meetings. And so whilst I think there's every possibility that we will see a change in place and how it's, you know, the structure of it, I don't think we can get away from that yet. And so I think, for instance, we've been reflecting on how might this manifest at Adastral Park. And I think what we'll probably see is a move to sort of even bigger hot desking, collaborative, temporary type spaces, you know, potentially, you know, that might be one outcome, you know, in terms of, you know, kind of the more fixed office type scenario that we see now. So, but I am very, you know, we are very passionate in my team about trying to work out how you replicate that in the meantime, because we definitely miss it. You know, I think that innovation culture, that innovation thrives to some sense on that impromptu, serendipitous nature of the way we need to collaborate. But we're pivoting, you know, and having to pivot all the time. So, you know, I talked about our showcase, which we use to kind of bring to life technology for our customer work, which is vital to us in terms of understanding their challenges and all the rest of it. And we've had to pivot to this virtual world, and it's stretching us to embrace technology, you know, at another level in terms of giving those immersive experiences. But the plus side is that people that, you know, on a global scale that would struggle to come to Adastral Park are now able to engage with us in a way that, you know, maybe they, you know, we hadn't anticipated previously. So, you know, with the bad comes good sometimes as well.
Yeah, and I think that's part of, you know, the broadening out of the innovation, part of the reason why this event is pretty global today. Absolutely. As well. So, so that brings me nicely into another question that we have is, what do you see as the greatest change in direction resulting from COVID, as opposed to an acceleration or decline in speed towards a formerly known goal? Yet-Ming, can I come to you to comment on that?
Well, you know, I think certainly what has happened is that COVID was, in some ways, was a great experiment in terms of how much does greenhouse gas emission decline if you shut down the global economy. The unintended consequences, at least there's data. And what the result was, it told us that roughly 17% reduction is all we get, right? And so it really reinforces this message that Richard also presented earlier, is that yes, you know, our near-term crisis is COVID, and our long-term enduring crisis is climate change. So that's been very useful. So I think as a way to sharpen our thinking about that. I'll say that one thing that has surprised me, and when you ask about what has changed about the way we might do business, one thing that has surprised me is that in the clean tech sector, funding for startups has actually gone up during COVID. I haven't figured out exactly why that is, and you know, I know multiple startups in this area where the fear was that I can't get out and meet anyone. I can't go to potential investors. But surprisingly, a number of instances, investors have come to the startups. And so I think that's an unexplained phenomenon, but maybe Richard understands why that happened better than I do. But I would say that the momentum towards climate change, I was fearful at the beginning that we would lose a lot of momentum. Actually, less concerned at this point because of what I've seen.
Brilliant. Yeah, I'd love to bring that question to Richard, and if you can provide us with any insights on why we've seen an increase into investment into clean tech startups.
I guess that's what my talk was about. So, people who are watching us should realise that while we weren't talking, we were waiting to talk, and so we didn't hear the speaker just before us. So there's a slight sort of dissonance between what we're doing. So yeah, I mean, I think I sort of said it, that those organizations that are thoughtful realize that Mother Nature is just going to go on and do what it does. That's what COVID was telling you. And so that you needed to get moving with climate change. And I would, there's an area that I didn't talk about anything technical, but I'm going to talk about just very quickly or briefly about a technical area, an area that I think is incredibly important. And we're really going to have to do a good job on, and the group of us are trying to see how you do that. So it's about good innovation and how you talk with people. And that's getting rid of greenhouse gases that are already in the atmosphere. So Yet-Ming was talking about the cement that you can do some of that with. When I started, which was about 5 years ago, being interested in greenhouse gas removal, there was nothing. I mean, there were companies that were stoically trying to do stuff, and they had very small amounts of money. And during shutdown, I'm going to get the numbers maybe around the wrong way, but one of those greenhouse gas removal companies, Climeworks, got an investment of $67 or $76 million, just like that. And then there's the cascade of these things, you know. Microsoft effectively talking about greenhouse gas removal, and it went on and on and on. And that's because companies are realizing that there are some activities that we do that we'll never be able to get the emissions to zero. So how are we going to do that? Oh, here we go. This is what we need to do. So that means, for me, that's a really strong signal. People in big organizations with significant emissions they will not be able to cope with are thinking. And they're thinking seriously. It's no longer CSR work. It is core activity of that business. And when it becomes core activity, that's when people start to look at where are the inventive things, the innovation, the knowledge, where can I find that? And that's when they start to spend money. It's when they start to spend money, it's core business. I think frankly, that's what's happening. And you're seeing it in all sorts of fascinating places. More of it, please.
Thank you, Richard. So to kind of round up the roundtable and the innovation journeys talk today, can I come around to each one of you to kind of give your sort of final tip to close the session on, you know, one takeaway to make it really actionable for businesses that are listening today? What should they go away and do tomorrow? Lisa, can I come to you?
Yes, there's a mix here, isn't there, of, you know, kind of topics. I mean, I guess could I just ask, Harveen, in terms of to do what, you know, so you know, to what advice for businesses to do what?
Yeah, so sorry if that wasn't clear, but what do they do in a post-COVID world now? How can they have a more responsible role? What are the key things they need to think about?
Well, I mean, I think yes, actually it relates to my previous answer, I think, about place. And so I think there's an element of, you know, kind of thinking through how you can restructure the way that you do business. So one of a very, very small slight aside, which is quite minor, but it might amuse you. In the days before COVID, I used to get a lot of grief as site director, amongst other things, as to the amount of traffic that was leaving sites. And I think that's just a tiny weeny example. I know, you know, we're talking much broader than that, but obviously since COVID that hasn't been a problem at all, and I'm using that as just an example as to actually what we found. I talked about the plus side of place is that we've got this normalized world where we can engage, and actually we can increase our footprint and we can increase our impact. We've found different ways of doing that solve problems that prior to COVID, you know, we always found really, you know, really problematic. And so I think the one thing you know, with my innovation hat on, obviously, as well, is how do we innovate, not just in terms of the solutions that we deliver for others, but how do we innovate and restructure ourselves in a way that actually, you know, and take the silver linings that we've learned from COVID in terms of how we can make a greater impact, but actually in a much more sustainable fashion.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. And I think it's really what you're saying, it's about questioning the obvious. We do things a certain way doesn't mean we have to do them. We all found we could do things differently, so kind of question everything and then find new ways and be disruptive. Yet-Ming, if I can bring that question to you, please.
Sure. I am an optimist, number one, as I always believe in the power of new technology. And the second thing is I tend to try to think I'll give you a very specific answer, which is, it goes back to the starting theme of what I talked about. I think that there's a huge amount of potential in this mega trend towards very low cost renewable electricity. And I think that's a very powerful tool. And we should think, not just the things that I talked about, but think about really creative ways to use that kind of a megatrend. We spent decades building up that capability. It's now in our laps, and cost of electricity will continue to decrease. The worldwide per capita usage of energy can go actually up, not down. We always talk about going down. Now it can actually go up. And so I think we should think about how to make the best use of all that.
Brilliant, thank you, Yet-Ming. And Richard, same question for you,
okay,
please.
so I will be more top down and I won't be specific. It's very difficult for me because I'm a techie guy and I keep on thinking restrain, do not talk techie. That's what Yet-Ming is going to do. So I'm going to talk at the higher level. So I would say for businesses, what I would encourage is address the challenges and opportunities of climate change seriously and with purpose. So that's the headline. That's what you should be doing. In order to do it, you need to start off by think. I'm a child of IBM. That used to be the motto, think. So start off, think, collaborate, engage, act, and iterate. What do I mean by that? Well, think about, learn and think about your business models and what you can do. Collaborate because you're in value chains. Get your partners around you. You're not on your own. Do not do this on your own. You need others. Engage with your staff. Engage with the outside world, but with purpose, with a clear picture of what you're trying to achieve. And when you've done that, you've got an innovation that you can start to act upon. So act. And then when you act, and you've got your prototype, you've got your demonstrator, iterate. Your first go will of course not be the right way. So iterate, but iterate all of it. Think again, figure out where you need to collaborate with more people and so on and so forth. So really what I'm calling for is purpose and cleverness.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Richard. That's a perfect note to round up the session on. And I think that leaves everybody, all the comments put together, that leaves all of the audience with a lot of food for thought. So I'd like to say thank you very much to Lisa, to Yet-Ming, and to Richard for a fantastic roundtable session. I'd very much like to thank the startups that joined us earlier today as well. The audience, thank you for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed the event. Thank you for taking part in the polls and for all the questions that you've put forward today. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to the MIT Industry Liaison Programme and Imperial Business Partner Programme.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.